country on short notice, I'm going to need a passport. So I applied for a passport. Three of the questions on passports are departure date, return date, countries that you plan to visit. Well, I really don't have any plans, I just want a passport. So on my passport where it said departure date, I just put short notice. And on return date, I said unlikely. And then on countries you plan to visit, I just put any country that doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States. I'm still waiting for my passport to come back. For some reason it's been held up. I don't know why. So I'm a man of a certain age. I grew up in Chillicothe, Missouri. Does anybody know where Chillicothe, ever heard of it? Yay, thank you very much. Chillicothe, Missouri, in north central Missouri. Funny thing, I just found out, I grew up there, I just found out that Chillicothe, the word, is a Shawnee Indian word for big town or big village. There used to be apparently a large Shawnee village near where the current town of Chillicothe is. And all my life, I always grew up thinking that Chillicothe was an Indian word for, I gotta get the fuck out of here. But now that I've been gone for a while, I'm starting to have some second thoughts about, I'm starting to come around to my hometown. And especially after I found out that Chillicothe, Missouri is the birthplace of sliced bread. Who knew that? I think everybody knows that now. It's kind of famous. It's the 1928, the first commercial bread slicer was used in Chillicothe, Missouri. So, and I don't know what the best thing to happen in Chillicothe since that, but I know that if you've had a sandwich recently and you appreciate the fact that you didn't have to slice your own bread, yeah, you're welcome. So it's a rural town, Chillicothe is, right? It's up in north central Missouri. It's surrounded by cows and cornfields. And growing up, although I lived in the city, I always wanted to be in the FFA. In high school, I wanted to join FFA, Future Farmers of America. A lot of my friends were in FFA. They were always getting out of school early to go to conferences and contests and conventions and whatnot. And most importantly, they got to wear those super cool blue jackets with the big FFA logo on the back. And that pretty much tells you all you need to know about my high school fashion sense. I wanted to wear one of those jackets. So I went to the advisor. I said, I'd like to join FFA. He said, do you live on a farm? No. Do you raise livestock? No. Do you raise any sort of crops or have a garden or anything? No, not really. Because that, Larry, it's FFA. We can't really let you into FFA if you don't have any farming experience or prospects. I said, okay, well, fine. But I was kind of pissed off. So I went out and I said, I'm going to get into the FFA. So I decided I'm going to raise livestock too. And I started with just 2 or 3 head. I worked my way up to a herd of 200. And I went back to the advisor, and the son of a bitch still wouldn't let me into the FFA because apparently, back then, an ant farm isn't considered real agriculture. So, there went my dreams to be in the FFA. So I left Chillicothe, and I've done some other things, including, I'm very happy to say, I've been married for 30 years. In a row to the same woman. Huh? So anybody else here been married 30 years in a row to the same woman? Or man, whatever. I win. So no, I get it. I think I'm a pretty good husband. I know I'm not a trophy husband. I'm more like a participation ribbon husband. But the good thing about being a participation ribbon husband is if you stick around long enough, eventually you become a trophy husband. So, 30 years, I think that's pretty good. That's not bad. Not everything is exactly like it was when we first got married. But some things are. We still have makeup sex. You guys know what makeup sex is. That's when, you have a big fight and then you make up and then you go have hot, steamy, raucous sex to seal the deal. We kind of still have something like that. It's called makeup sex. It's where we have an argument And then we go to bed, and she makes up a reason not to have sex. And I make up a reason to go into the bathroom with the iPad for 15 or 20 minutes, depending on how strong the Wi-Fi signal is. But, makeup sex is makeup sex, Anyway, I had a friend recently, speaking of being married for 30 years, he's a newlywed. I'm glad he's not here tonight, because otherwise I was going to skip this joke. He's a newlywed, and he asked me, he's kind of getting the feel of the land for his new marriage and what's allowed and what's not. And he said, "Hey, Larry, do you ever fart in front of Mrs. Archer?" I fart in front of Mrs. Archer. And not only do I fart in front of Mrs. Archer, I announce that I am farting in front of Mrs. Archer. And not only do I announce that I'm farting in front of Mrs. Archer, I do it in a terrible Scottish accent. It goes like this. "Oh, lassie, I farted. I farted like a furtin' furter." No, she loves it. Trust me, she loves it. And she loves me, even though I'm not a particularly interesting person. I'm not an interesting person. I am a person of interest in several ongoing investigations, including the mystery of what happened to the Thin Mints that were in the freezer for book club. That's a cold case. It's never going to be solved. Trust me. So I'm not an interesting person, but more than not, I'm a likable person, and which is generally speaking pretty good. But in one regard, it's a little bit disappointing because I am a likable person. So that means I don't really have any arch enemies. Growing up, comic book heroes and cartoon heroes, they all had arch enemies. Superman had Lex Luthor, Batman had Joker, and Spider-Man had the Green Goblin. Everybody, all these comic book and cartoon heroes, they had arch enemies, and I don't have any arch enemies. I don't even have a worst enemy. You know what I mean by a worst enemy? It's one level below arch enemy, but a level above just plain old enemy. And everybody has them because they say, "I wouldn't even wish that on my worst enemy." It's like everybody's saying stuff that they wouldn't wish on their worst enemy. And I'm just thinking, why the hell have a worst enemy if you're not going to wish terrible things on them? I've got a guy that bullied me in 6th grade, and to this very day, I still wish that he'd come down with a bad case of the shingles. And he's not even a worst enemy. He's just an asshole that I knew 50 years ago. So I guess it's okay not to have, being a good Christian there. Okay not to have worst enemies, but it is a little disappointing that I don't have an arch enemy. I kind of always wanted to have one. Do I have any blood donors? Blood donors in the crowd? Anybody? Woo! Let's hear it for blood donors. Blood donors rock. One pint of blood, they tell me, can save 3 lives, and that's incredible. I recently surpassed the 10-gallon mark of blood donations. And I thought, yeah, that's pretty good. 10 gallons, that's 10 gallons, 8 pints per gallon. That's 80 pints times 3. That's 200. I've saved 240 people, so I feel pretty good about myself. But if you've given blood, you know that there's a survey you take, right? First they say, wow, how you feeling? They ask you about what drugs, what medications you're on. Then they start asking you about your sex life, very personal stuff. Have you ever paid for sex? Have you ever exchanged money or drugs for sex? Have you ever had sex? And it's always even once. Have you ever had sex even once with another man? Of course, that's for men. And of course, no. But and as intrusive as those are, they're not all inclusive. Because I found out recently that in Canada, if you're a blood donor in Canada, they ask you all the sex questions too. And then they ask you, have you, as part of any current or past job, cared for or handled monkeys or their waste products? I don't know what the hell's going on in Canada with monkeys. All I know is this big fight we're having about a wall down along the Mexican border. We need to hire the Mexicans to build that wall along the Canadian border, because they're doing some weird shit up there with monkeys, and there's only a matter of time before that monkey shit comes down here. And in fact, it can't just be a wall, because monkeys can climb a wall. It needs to be a moat and a wall, but to keep those Canadian monkeys up there with the Canadians, because I don't know what they're doing. Anyway, the other day, and I'm sure this has happened to everybody, somebody walked up to me and they said, "You look familiar. Do I know you?" And I'm thinking, no, I don't think you know me. No. You look just like a guy I know. I said, "Well, that may be true, but I don't know you." And he goes, then you have a doppelganger. I have a what? And so I went and I looked up doppelganger, and more or less, there's lots of definitions, but more or less it's an evil twin. And I thought, oh crap, I've got an evil twin. And then I started thinking about it. I thought, what if I'm the evil twin? And then I thought, I felt so sorry for that poor son of a bitch who has me for an evil twin, because if I'm their evil twin, they're the most boring person I've ever heard of. I'm the guy who stops his car to help turtles across the street, so I'd make a terrible evil twin. I just wouldn't be good at evil in any form, because really evil requires scheming and conniving and all these other things that sound very exhausting. I want to be somebody's slightly underachieving twin. That would be about my speed. That's the kind of twin I want to be. Oh gosh. Anybody get caught in the rain today? I went in, I got a haircut. It wasn't blue sky, but it wasn't raining. I come back out, it's pouring rain. So I run through the pouring rain, I get in my truck, I slam the door, it stops raining. I drive home, it's not raining, I open the door, it starts raining again. I don't know what it means, rain. But it reminded me of something we've all heard people say, like, oh, if you don't like the weather in Missouri, wait an hour, it'll change. That's the bullshit. You know where else they say, wait an hour, it'll change? Literally every fucking place on the planet. The weather changes everywhere, except for maybe like the Arabian desert or sub-Sudan desert or something, where there's probably a Bedouin saying, "Oh, so you don't like the weather here? Tough shit, it's like this all the time." But other than that, it's a horrible, horrible cliche. As is, I was at work the other day, and I mentioned in conversation, oh, I assume that someone's doing that. And I had a coworker say, you know what happens when you assume? Does anybody know what happens when you assume? Yeah, makes an ass of you and me. That's what they say. Bullshit! Here's what happens when you assume. You're either right or you're wrong. And most of the time, guess what? You're right. Right? If I'm walking down the street and turn down a dark alley and I see a clown with a butcher knife, is it okay if I assume I'm in danger? Because I'm going to. I'm either going to scream or crap my pants or something. I'm going to assume I'm in danger. And if it turns out that clown with a butcher knife was simply a butcher who likes to entertain children at the children's hospital as a clown when he gets off of work, I'll apologize. But in the meantime, I'm going to assume. And the act of assuming is actually just it's a defense mechanism that's evolved over thousands of years to help us preserve the species and survive from essentially knife-wielding circus performers. So it's good to presume, especially with those knife-wielding clowns. You know what, folks? That's it for me. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you didn't, bite me.